was 1947. The war had been over for a little over 2 years, but the war inside of her, that one was still raging. She had just finished telling a crowd of Germans about forgiveness in a church basement, about a God who throws sins to the bottom of the sea and puts up a sign that reads, "No fishing allowed." And then she saw him. He was moving toward her in the crowd. In her words, he was a heavy-set man in a gray overcoat, but she didn't see the overcoat. She saw a blue uniform, a visored cap with skull and crossbones. She saw Ravensbrück. He extended his hand. "Fraulein," he said, "will you forgive me?" She said her arm stayed frozen at her side. This is Lift Up Your Day. I'm Rodney Coe, and every episode I bring you a true story that just might change the way you see your day. And remember how God is with you as you walk through each one. Corrie Ten Boom was a watchmaker's daughter from Haarlem. She never married. She never planned to be a missionary. She certainly never planned to be a hero. For 50 years, she fixed watches and taught Sunday school above her father's shop. When the Germans occupied Holland, the Ten Boom family began hiding Jewish refugees behind a false wall in Corrie's bedroom, a place barely big enough for 6 people to stand in. Over the course of the war, that hiding place saved an estimated 800 Jewish lives until an informer betrayed them. On February 28, 1944, the Gestapo raided their home. Corrie's father, Casper, 84 years old, died in prison 10 days later. The soldiers asked him if he knew he could die for helping the Jews. He looked at them and said, "It would be an honor to give my life for God's ancient people." Corrie and her sister Betsie were sent to Ravensbrück, a women's concentration camp where over 96,000 women died. The conditions were unspeakable, but even as she faded, Betsie kept whispering something Corrie couldn't shake. "Corrie," she said, "there is no pit so deep that God's love is not deeper still." I want you to think about that. There is no pit so deep that God's love is not deeper still. No one is beyond the grace of God and the love of God. Betsie died in Corrie's arms on December 16, 1944. 12 days later, Corrie was released, later discovered to be a clerical error. 1 week after her release, every woman her age in the camp was sent to the gas chambers. A clerical error, or as Corrie would spend the rest of her life telling anyone who would listen, the hand of God. After the war, Corrie packed her suitcase and became what she called a tramp for the Lord. For 36 years, she traveled to more than 60 countries, preaching one message everywhere she went: forgiveness, grace. In Romans 8:1, no condemnation. But that moment in that church basement tested every word she ever preached or believed. The man standing before her was a guard at Ravensbrück. He stood in that shower room when the women were forced to walk past leering men, SS men. He had been there when Betsie suffered, when Betsie faded. Now he was a Christian and he wanted Corrie's forgiveness. She stood there, her arm would not move. She said she had preached forgiveness for the entire room. She believed it with every fiber of her theology, but she didn't have nothing to give this guy. She prayed the most honest prayer of her life. "Jesus, I cannot forgive this man. I cannot do it. Give me your forgiveness." And then mechanically, woodenly, she said, she thrust her hand into his. She wrote later that what happened next was unlike anything she had ever experienced. A current, electricity flooded from her shoulder down through her arm and into their clasped hands. It was warm, supernatural, not from inside of her. She looked at him and said, "I forgive you, brother, with all my heart." And she wept. Not from grief, from grace. She later called it the most powerful experience of God's love she had ever known. Not because she mustered forgiveness within herself, but because God supplied it when she had absolutely none to give. Romans 8:1 tells us there is now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. No condemnation, not for the prisoner, not for the guard, not for the broken, not for the ashamed. Corrie Ten Boom spent 33 years living in that verse, carrying the worst memories of a human being could ever carry, and telling the world that God, who forgave her sins, could also empower her to forgive someone else's. Someone once said, forgiveness is an act of the will, and the will can function regardless of the temperature of the heart. Is there a name you can't say without your chest tightening? A memory that still has a grip on your life? You don't have to muster what you don't have. You don't have to make up forgiveness. You just have to ask. Because the same God who supplied forgiveness in that Munich church basement will supply whatever you need. A watchmaker's daughter, a hiding place behind a false wall, a frozen arm in a church basement, and a current of grace that moved her hand to shake his. Corrie Ten Boom died on April 15th, 1983, on her 91st birthday. I pray God lifts up your day and grants you the grace to forgive someone that maybe has hurt you deeply. And I pray God blesses your day. Keep looking up.